Hello everyone, my name's Aaliyah and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be doing a speed paint as well as explaining my digital process. I've been watching the X-Files for a long while now and I'm currently on season 7. It's easily become one of my favorite shows and I would highly recommend watching it. Anyway, enjoy! When starting a drawing, I always look for a reference first. Now for this piece, that was pretty easy because I was referencing a scene from the show, but usually it's a lot longer process because I'll find a reference for the pose, the background, and maybe even the outfits or the facial expressions. I think that finding references is super important because, especially if you're a beginner artist, it shows you how to draw from life and you can add to your visual library so you can draw those things better in the future. So yeah, references are definitely a big thing for me. And then with all my drawings, both traditional and digital, I begin with a really rough sketch. I use any brush for this, it doesn't really matter. I just use it as a way to plan out the composition and sketch out the rough shapes and forms of the characters, as well as the background. I usually do multiple of these sketches, not for this drawing because, again, I was drawing from a scene from the show, but I always want to try different compositions to see which one I like best, because sometimes my first idea isn't always the greatest one, and I think it's like that for most people, so you should definitely try doing that when starting a new piece. Next to the line art, and this is actually one of my favorite parts of the drawing, even though I know a lot of people don't like it, I find it pretty relaxing. What I used to do was do a really detailed sketch rather than a rough one, and then I would do the line art on top of that. And though I think it was good for planning everything out and feeling like I wasn't having to be committed to the line art, it took a really long time, and my drawings already take forever, so it wasn't worth it. So now I just draw right over my rough sketch and do my line art from that using my references. And I've always been a big fan of really detailed, clean line art. And I used to be disappointed because it would never look good. My sketch would always look better. But what I realized is, as I feel like a lot of people have said, line weights are super important. So it's making some lines thicker and some thinner. So what I try to do is pick a light source when I'm doing the line art, and then I will make the lines that are furthest from the light source the thickest lines, and then I'll make the ones closer to the light source way thinner. And I also usually do a thicker line on the outside of the characters, and then inside the lines will be a bit thinner. I think this really helped make my line art more dynamic. As you saw before, I always start with making my line art black and then I'll color it after. I do this because I feel like it's just easier to color the line art when everything's already in place. I'll just alpha lock the layer and then pick colors and color the areas that I want. Plus, a lot of the line art is black anyway if I'm doing a dark drawing, so it just makes it a whole bunch easier for me. Once I finish picking the colors for the line art, I will duplicate the line art layer and then Gaussian blur it to about 3%. Sometimes I'll put it on hard light mode, depends on the drawing. I usually do that for a brighter drawing if I wanted like the Gaussian blur line art to stand out more. It just makes the line art look a lot better, and it kind of adds to the drawing once you start shading. I apologize that the video doesn't line up with what I'm saying. I didn't film my rough sketch, so when I was talking about that, it started on my line art, so everything's kind of messed up. I hope it doesn't bother anyone. For my line art, for my flat colors, I use the select tool to select different areas and fill them in, Coloring it by hand takes a really long time, and I feel like you can get more precise edges with the select tool. I'll make a separate layer for each thing. I have a separate layer for their skin, their clothes, for the back wall, for the front desk, and I named them for this drawing because there were so many layers because the background was so detailed. Usually I don't do that though. It is a good idea because it helps keep all your layers organized so you don't lose track of anything or draw in the wrong layer. What I used to do to pick colors for a drawing was screenshot the finished flat colors, then I would go into photos and edit it how I wanted like the colors to look, whether that be darker or lighter or more vibrant, and then I would use it as a reference in the app and I would color pick from that. Now, I feel like that was cheating a little bit. I want to learn how to actually know color theory, so I don't need to do that. I can just do it all in my head and kind of figure out what colors would work for the vibe I'm going for. I tried to do that with this drawing and I think it went pretty well. I wanted his office to be dark and gloomy and not super saturated, so I used that as my starting point and I like how it turned out. I honestly don't have much more to say about this part of the drawing, so I will start talking again when we get to shading. Enjoy the music! Hello again. Okay, so shading digitally took me the longest to figure out. I actually kind of gave up when I first started digital art. I was coming from alcohol markers and I just couldn't figure out how to use it. I was trying to use the airbrush without making it look airbrushy in the way that people don't like, and I just had a really difficult time. I only recently found how I like to shade, and that is using the round brush. I think it's inside the painting section. I use that brush for almost everything, unless it's like a textured wall. Everything in this drawing is shaded using the round brush. And I like to start with the skin because I really enjoy shading skin, and I also feel like it's something that people look to first. I feel like people are drawn to the face. And I always start with those kinds of things because by the end of the drawing, I start to lose steam and my shading just becomes a lot worse. So I'll start with the thing that I think is most important. In that case, I started with the face, the clothes, and the hair, basically just Mulder and Scully because they're the focal point. And then I went to shading the background. When I start to shade, I begin with a slight darker layer just to plan out where I want the shadows. As you can see on Mulder's blue shirt, I just have a slightly darker blue to plan out where I want all of the shadows to be, and then I'll go more in depth after. I try to add hard lines and then softer edges so it makes it more realistic. Once I have 2 or 3 layers of darker colors on, I'll start with the highlights, so I'll choose a slightly lighter color. Sometimes what I'll do is, like, if the shirt is blue, I'll do my highlight color in like a reddy white. I didn't do it for this drawing, but sometimes I think it adds a really nice contrast. In the actual drawing, I'm starting with Scully's skin, so I'll go a little bit more in depth about how I shade skin. So as I said before, I will add a slightly darker color to plan out the shadows, and I'll make this color a different shade than the one that is the base color because I want it to have some variation, and I feel like shading skin in all of the same shade can look very boring and it doesn't look lifelike at all. Then I'll do my highlights in a very light yellow, again, so it looks different from the base color of the skin. And after all of that, I just keep adding depth and I keep going over in different colors. And at the end, I'll maybe add some shadows in a purpley color. For this one, I actually did green. I think because the skin was very red, so I did the opposite color to contrast it. Like I said before, I sometimes do that in clothing and on skin too. To finish it off, I'll add some blush to add more life into the face. To do that, I'll create a new layer and then put some red on both cheeks and a little bit on the nose. Then I'll blend it in and I'll lower the opacity of the layers so that the red blends in with the skin a little bit better. One thing I have still yet to figure out how to draw is hair. I've been trying different strategies for a long time and I still haven't really figured out a way to make it look good. What I currently do is have a base color, then I'll make a new layer, and I'll add these little lines following the way that I drew the hair in the line art. And then I'll alpha lock the newly created layer with the little lines on it, and I'll kind of shade it. So at the roots, I'll add a darker color, and then I'll have the middle be a highlight, and then I'll go back to the base layer and add even darker shading so you can kind of see the little lines. I don't think this looks particularly good, so if you have any tips and tricks, let me know down in the comments. Again, I don't have much to say about the rest of this process. I just do what I said before. I'll add a base layer to plan out where I want all of the shadows to be. Then I'll add some highlights and then I'll just keep going over and making the shadows darker until I'm satisfied with it. Okay, I lied. I do have a little bit more to say. So after I finish shading everything in the drawing, I'll add a multiply layer where the shadows are going to be. In this case, the light is in the middle of the room, so I made the general shadows on the outside of the characters. After that, I'll add another layer and it'll be an overlay layer. In that layer, I'll color with a light yellow to add some of the highlights, and I did this on the inside of the characters because the light should be coming from kind of above them. I think this adds more flair to the drawing and just makes it look more like a finished product. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as well as follow me at aliflower88 on Instagram. Bye-bye!